Ning was plenty bored staying in the hotel for the past 3 weeks and a half as nothing fun had happened to take away his boredom. Tim and Jasmine seemed incredibly taken with the city and went out each day to learn more while leaving Ning alone to do his own thing. However, there wasn't much Ning wanted to do after going around the city for the first few days. Now, he was just waiting for the Pope to come out. However, the man showed no sign of ever wanting to visit the people of the city despite so many people showing up and packing the streets even more. Not a single person knew when the Pope would leave. The door to his room opened and she walked in to sit on Tim's bed while he was gone. Ning looked at her curiously and narrowed his eyes. "Is something wrong?" he asked. "Yes," Jasmine snapped. "Something is wrong. Something is very wrong." Anger filled her voice. "Why can't that stupid man take a hint and realize that I'm not interested in him?" Ning sighed. "Gallimore?" he asked. "Who else?" Jasmine asked in an exasperated tone. "That is the only man that is trying to make me go mad right now. Are all men like this? Do I have to put it in writing for them to understand?" "I don't think that would help for this sort," Ning said. "Just to be clear, you have told him that you're not interested in him, right? No funny hints." "I can't tell him it out loud just yet," Jasmine said, almost looking at Ning in shock. "That's where we get all the information about the Pope in the first place." "You don't really have to go through that if you don't want to," Ning said. "We'll find what information we can on our own. The Pope's movement would be too big for any of us to miss even without being told what was happening." The door suddenly opened again and the two fell quiet. Tim walked in slowly, with a look of absolute shock filling his face. "Did you guys hear?" he asked as she walked in. Ning's eyes perked up. "What, hear what?" he asked. "Is the Pope going to leave his chambers finally?" "Huh?" Tim looked at Ning with a confused look. "Is the Pope, no, wait, are you asking me?" Ning gestured as though this should all be obvious to Tim. "Oh, no," Tim quickly said. "This is not about the Pope or anything of the like." "Then," Ning asked, "what is it about?" "Zarius," Tim answered. "Zarius Braxford. You told me to keep an eye out on him, didn't you?" "Oh, the inventor," Ning got excited once more. "What about him? Did he appear in that amusement park or whatnot to show his new invention?" "Yes," Tim said simply. "That's exactly what he did." He thought for a bit and spoke again. "I suppose it shouldn't be as fun to learn that he has a new invention as it is to learn about the invention itself." "Give it to me," Ning said. Jasmine looked curious as well. After traveling with Ning, she had come to pay a bit more attention to the name Zarius Braxford as well, and by now she knew all of his inventions. He's managed to create something he calls the instant painter. Apparently, with this new technology, you can take an image of someone and print it on a piece of paper. "Oh," Ning reacted. "He created a camera, huh? Good for him." "Eh, what?" Tim asked. "Yeah, what?" Jasmine asked as well. "Nothing," Ning said. No, Jasmine said quickly. "You cannot just say nothing and expect us to forget about it. Come on. Tell me what you know," she said. Ning sighed. "You guys wouldn't know even if I told you," he said. "So I choose to not tell you anything. For now, let us focus on the task at hand." Jasmine pouted, wanting more but not getting anything. Tim stared at Ning for a second and gave some more information to Ning. This time, it was not longer about the invention, but rather the inventor himself. Zarius Braxford left the amusement park and had to run away before people could crowd him. Apparently, he disappeared from the city and no one knows where he went afterward, Tim said. "Any idea where he came from?" Ning asked. "Not that the newspaper says anything about it," Tim said. "They talked way more about the invention itself, so there wasn't much. Maybe once the excitement surrounding the invention dies down, we will get more curiosities and answers regarding where the man had gone." "Let us hope so," Ning said. They were only talking for a while when a knock on the door distracted all three of them. Jasmine quickly walked to the door and opened it. Outside, one of the hotel's staff stood with a slightly hunched back. "What is it?" Jasmine asked. "Ah, miss. Sir Gallimore of House Maris has come to the hotel and is requesting." Again, Jasmine couldn't keep the words out of her mouth. "Ah, he?" Jasmine ignored the man and walked to the window. Below, on the busy street, Gallimore stood alone, waiting for her to come out. "Damn this man," she said and rushed out of the room. Tim and Ning looked at each other and quickly walked out as well. Only, they wouldn't be there to help her but to watch the drama unfold. Walking outside, Jasmine walked straight to Gallimore and crossed her arms. "What is it?" she asked. "We just went on a coffee break. Are you here to take me out on another one?" "Please, I don't want to." "Ah," the young man said with a dejected voice. "I wasn't aware you were feeling bad about it all. My apologies." Jasmine sighed. "No, that's not your fault. Anyway, you should leave." "Oh." Gallimore's physique seemed to heal itself as he looked at Ning. "Sir Ning, the Cardinal of Life wishes to converse with you over some dinner. Would you be so kind to follow me?" Ning, Tim, and Jasmine followed Gallimore out of their hotel as they made their way up the mountain toward level 2, where they were to meet someone in a hotel. The climb up took no more than 2 hours in total, and in that entire time, no one spoke anything more than a few questions to Gallimore, who simply didn't answer anything by claiming that he was not allowed to. 3 hours later, they arrived at a restaurant cum hotel named the Holy Cape. It was a 10-storied hotel with brilliant blue, white, and purple colors giving a unique aesthetics to the hotel that none of the nearby hotels had. The hotel floor was entirely covered with smooth marble tiles that were polished until one could see a reflection on them. When the group entered, they were led to a fancy room toward the back of the hotel, secluded from many of the guests who seemed to already be there. Several paladins lined up throughout the hallway as Ning and the rest passed through them on their way. The door opened and Ning entered to see more paladins standing around in the room. At the center is a fancy dinner table with several empty plates lined up for 6 different people. 2 people already sat on one side. Ning immediately recognized Tanaya, who waited in the room with her eyes on the floor. The other man was a scar-faced man with a tall and lean body and killer eyes on his face. He looked up when the door opened and stared at everyone with emotionless eyes as they entered the room. He judged everyone as they walked in and stood next to the table. His eyes jumped to all 3 of them and then turned toward Tanaya, who sat next to him. "Are these the 3 you mentioned?" he asked her. "Yes, Cardinal," she answered. The man nodded and turned toward the 3. "I am Marcus Boreal, the Cardinal of Life," he said. Tim and Jasmine failed to hide their gasps while Ning simply smiled at the man. "I am Ning Ruigong. These are my friends Timothy and Jasmine, but I have a feeling you already knew that." "I knew who you were when I sent for you," the man said. "Sit." The man gestured the 3 toward the empty seats, and the group took them. Ning sat on the middle chair, while Tim sat to his right and Jasmine to his left. The man waited patiently as the 3 sat and got themselves comfortable. Once it appeared that they were comfortable, he brought out something and placed it on the table. It was a small wooden box of about 10 centimeters wide and thick, and about 20 centimeters long. There was a lid to open it, but the man kept it closed for now. He then looked at the 3 and asked, "Are any of you aware why you are here with me?" Tim and Jasmine kept quiet, letting Ning handle the talking for them. "Judging by the lady next to you, you might have heard a few rumors about me," Ning said. "True rumors?" the man asked. "Who knows what she told you?" Ning said. "Might be true, might not be." The scar-faced man gave a small smirk before scoffing. "I thought you would be like that," he said and reached for the wooden box he had placed in between them. He took off the box and revealed a golden dagger with a slightly curved blade with a ruby embedded in the handle. The blade itself looked sharp and without scratches, as though it had only just been created before it was brought here. Both Jasmine and Tim opened their eyes wide at the dagger. One was surprised by the jewel and the price such a dagger would fetch, and the other was surprised at the fact that he knew what this dagger was. "The dagger of truth," Tim said unintentionally before quickly looking up just in case he had done something wrong. The Cardinal looked at Tim with a slightly curious look on his face. "So you have already looked into what the church owns and does not," the Cardinal said. "Huh? No," Tim quickly said. "I just know a bit about various Zuran treasure, that's all." The man's face suddenly fell. "Do not take the Lord's name in such a simplistic manner," he said. "But you are correct in that this is indeed a divine treasure of the Lord." The man took out the dagger and presented it to Ning. Ning reached out for the dagger, wondering if the man was going to stab him. He simply let Ning grab it instead and take it. Ning took the dagger and looked at it closely. The sharpness on it was quite strong, but that was never what made Zuran treasures unique. "What does it do?" Ning asked the man. "Anyone whose blood is spilled by that dagger cannot speak any lie to its owner," the man explained. "Ah," Dagger of truth. Makes sense, Ning said. So what, do you wish for me to cut myself? That is exactly what I wish for you to do, the man said and gestured Ning to do it. His eyes almost seemed to dare him to refuse and see what would happen. You just need my blood, right? Ning asked. The man's eyes narrowed for a second, wondering what Ning was talking about. He slowly nodded to answer Ning's question and suddenly gave out a horrible yelp as Ning bit his cheek and spit blood at the treasure. Spitting at a divine treasure was the highest form of disrespect Ning could have shown here, and that angered the cardinal as well as the paladins behind Ning. Several swords were pulled out at once, causing Jasmine and Tim to shriek in fear. Tanaya quickly looks up and about, trying to think of ways to calm everyone there. Ning simply handed the dagger back to the scar-faced man. You have the blood you wanted, he said, now ask your questions. The tension in the room had grown so thick that one wouldn't even need the dagger of truth to cut it. Any ordinary blade would do it. The paladins stood next to Ning with their swords drawn, ready to swing down on him for the transgression he had shown to their lord's treasure. The Cardinal of Life stared at Ning with wide eyes of anger for a solid few seconds before taking a deep breath. He wiped the blood on a napkin and placed the dagger back on the box before closing the box and placing it away. What is your real name? The man asked. Ning Ruigong, Ning answered. Where are you from? The man then asked. Far away, Ning answered. The man frowned slightly. Answer more clearly. Tell me where you're exactly from, he asked. You don't need to know that, Ning said. What, just because you could only get truths from me, you thought you could ask and get all the answers? You'll only get what I am willing to give you. The paladins behind Ning looked to the cardinal for any sort of order. Don't worry though, Ning said. I intend to be mostly free with my words. I won't hide most things, so ask away. All right then, I'll be forthright as well then, the cardinal said. What is your intention in coming to Erin? To meet the Pope, Ning said. Just to be clear, that was my intention before coming here. Before? What change? The cardinal asked. I realized there was more than just the Pope in the country. Now I intend to meet with the Pope and the cardinals as well. 1 down, 3 to go. What do you intend to do when you've met the Pope? The cardinal asked. Shake his hands, Ning said. What? The older man was somewhat confused. Shake his hands. Yes, Ning said. Why? The cardinal asked. There were many religious fanatics who wanted to get close to the Pope to meet him, but Ning didn't look like a fanatic at all. I wish to shake his hands to figure out if he's the one I'm looking for or not, Ning answered. You're looking for someone? The cardinal asked. What for? So I could, how should I put it? Rid the world of evil, Ning said with a massive grin on his face. You would call that God's work, wouldn't you? So you intend to kill the Pope when you meet him? The cardinal asked. I never said that, Ning said. I only said that I would kill the thing I'm looking for. If that happens to be the Pope, that's not on me. Jasmine slowly moved away from Ning as she saw several of the paladins creep toward Ning with their hands on their sword hilts. So you confirm that you do indeed wish to kill the Pope if he happens to be the one that you're looking for, the cardinal asked. Indeed, Ning said. Also, just to be clear, it doesn't have to be the Pope. It could be the cardinals as well. Maybe even the archbishops, but I'm not thinking about them just yet. You seem to hold a grudge with the entire upper echelon of the church, the man said. Nope, just one, Ning said. You can continue trying to make it seem like I'm planning on something horrendous, and maybe you'll be able to succeed in making me appear that way. However, just know that deep in your heart, whatever I'm doing it with the best of intentions. And that you will know is true because I spoke it and I believe it. The cardinal looked down at the wooden box in his hands, wondering if it had somehow been tampered with. But of course, that was impossible, wasn't it? I won't play word games with you. I will ask the question simply, so answer it simply. Are you in Erin to kill the Pope? He asked again. Maybe, Ning said. Give me a yes or no answer, the man demanded. There is no yes or no, Ning said. There is just a maybe. Of course, there is always a yes or no, the man said. All right. Let me ask you a question then, Ning said. If you ate 22 grapes from your bowl, are there 15 grapes left in the bowl? The cardinal's scar twitched slightly when he heard the question. What? He asked. Ning repeated the question. Answer me in yes or no. Are there 15 grapes left in the bowl? He asked. I don't know, the cardinal said. I don't know how many there were supposed to be at the start before I started eating. I'll need more information. Exactly, Ning said. Will I kill the Pope? Maybe, maybe not. I can't really tell you right now since I don't have enough information to give you everything you need. The cardinal frowned. All right then, he said. You also mentioned that you wanted to kill the 3 cardinals as well, including me. Just one, Ning clarified. And again, I do not have enough information to tell you everything at all. I require more information. Cardinal Marcus rubbed his beard with a thoughtful look on his face as he tried to make sense of the situation. All right, since you keep giving me a maybe as an answer, maybe you could tell me what would make it definite. That handshake, Ning said, reminding the cardinal. I just need a handshake. Do you need mine as well? He asked. Actually, no, Ning said. I only need to touch the other person, and I've already touched you. Ning grinned, giving a terrifying smile. You're not it, so you get to live to see another day. The man frowned. When did you touch me? He asked. When you took back the dagger, Ning smiled. You were so distracted with my spit that you didn't notice what I had done. The cardinal's face paled slightly when he realized what a mistake he had made. Had Ning wanted to kill him with a touch, he would have been dead. The cardinal quickly took back his hands and stared at Ning with wide, angry eyes. You dared to touch me when I wasn't looking? He asked. You dared to ask me to cut myself. So why not? Ning said. And don't get too angry. Being angry isn't good for your health. Tell me, did your scar come from when you were angry by some chance? The man reflexively touched his scar and narrowed his eyes. I will ignore what you just said, he said. But I cannot ignore the fact that you wish to kill either the Pope or one of the other 2 cardinals. Or none, Ning added. What? The cardinal asked. I came to check if either of you 4 is the one I'm looking for. I never said one of you was guaranteed to be the person, Ning said. I have 2 more people far away in the world that are also my target. Once I confirm here that none of you 4 are it, I will leave the island and travel away. The man frowned at those words, giving it a long pause and thought as he went through what was said. You're being serious about it? He asked. Of course, Ning said. I'm always serious. Okay, maybe not, but this time I am. The man thought for a bit. What exactly are you looking for? He asked. When you touch me, what were you looking for? I have a power, Ning said. When I touch people, I can tell whether they are human or not. I'm looking for someone that is non-human. The man frowned. Non-human? What do you mean? Like an animal? He asked. No, not exactly an animal, Ning said. More like a being created out of nothing. Something created out of nothing? The man asked, frowning for a moment. Like a god? Ning's eyes widened slightly and he smiled. Yeah, kind of like a god, he said. Or a duh. Like Zarinus? The man asked again. Ning couldn't help but chuckle a little at those words. Actually, exactly like Zarinus, he said with a shrug. The old man's eyes narrowed for a second. What do you mean? He asked. Ning gave a lopsided smile. I think you know what it means, he said. Surely you don't. Yes, Ning said. I'm going to kill Zarinus. Gasps of shock and surprise went through the hallway. Sir Ning, what do you mean by that? Tim quickly asked. Wait, what do you mean you're going to kill Zarinus? Jasmine asked. Tanaya looked up, her eyes flashing in surprise as well. She looked for any signs of joke on Ning's face but she couldn't find any. Gallimore and the rest of the paladins were equally confused as well. Explain to me what you mean, the cardinal asked. What are you trying to say? Exactly what you're hearing, Ning said. If any one of the cardinal or the pope turns out to be Zarinus in disguise, I'm going to kill them. The cardinal glared at Ning with a look of pure shock. How dare you? How dare you say that about his lord and... Better to not let things be known by everyone, Ning said and snapped his fingers. Instantly, the people around the room swayed as they lost the last few seconds of memories instantly. Ning also took down an anti-communication barrier that he had set up in the room, just in case Zarinus had some way to listen in to one of his followers' conversations. Ning knew that it didn't work automatically as it would with a planetary will who knew anything and everything that happened around their planet. However, A constellation could put contingencies into work where it would work in similar ways, so he couldn't let the thing find out just yet that he was after him. As the anti-communication barrier came down, the cardinal looked at him and spoke. "You dared to touch me when I wasn't looking?" he asked. "Yes," Ning said. "What are you going to do?" He leaned forward. "Do you think I'm threatened just because you shout? Just because you sit there with a group of paladins surrounding you? Do you think you are safe from me? The only reason you haven't seen me before today is because I let you live your life as it did. I planned on meeting you all normally when I could, but if you want to, we can speed that up as well." A sharp metal was already on Ning's neck on the back, pressed slightly against it as Gallimore spoke. "Step back from the cardinal if you do not wish to lose your head," he said in a grim voice. Ning continued staring into the cardinal, who had now broken in a bit of sweat. He slowly leaned backward and felt the blade move along with him. Gallimore was doing what he was supposed to, but he was also not trying to hurt him. "You're a good fighter," Ning said, twisting his head around toward Gallimore. "I barely heard you taking your blade out." Gallimore's eyes narrowed, unsure of how he could take this compliment. He looked toward the cardinal for some assistance, but the cardinal seemed very scared at the moment. Ning's words had shaken him. From the cardinal's perspective, just seconds ago, he had just found out that Ning had secretly touched him while handing back the dagger. Then, as soon as he had found that out, he had been threatened by Ning, and not in a simple manner as well. The man could only wonder what Ning could have done to him at that moment if he wanted to. The Cardinal of Life felt as though death was right around the corner, and the one that showed him the direction to that corner was Ning. Ning sat in a relaxed manner. "Don't be scared," he said. "I'm not going to kill you, or even hurt you. I don't hurt anyone who doesn't hurt me first. You are safe." The cardinal took a few heavy breaths before looking back at Ning. Ning gave a small rueful smile. "If you're feeling scared at the moment, I can leave. We can talk some other time. However, do tell me if you know when the Pope will be leaving on his little parade. I kinda don't have a lot of time to waste waiting for him to do so." The cardinal simply scoffed. "Stay back," he said. Gallimore nodded and moved away, placing his sword back on its sheath, and stood by the wall along with the many other paladins. The cardinal then looked back at Ning. "I have another matter to talk with you," he said. "Oh, what matter?" Ning asked. "Captain Tanaya here mentions that a serial killer has potentially entered our country and that you were the one who notified her of this. Is that correct?" he asked. "Breval? Oh yes," Ning said. "But that was nearly a month ago. I'm not sure if he's still here or not." "How did you know he had come here a month ago?" the man asked. "I won't be revealing how I know that," Ning said. "Why do you ask me of this?" "The Pope can't walk out into the parade as long as there is danger in the country, and if this serial killer you speak of is indeed in the country, then the Pope won't leave his dwelling for a long time," the cardinal explained. "So, if I want the Pope to leave his little home, the criminal needs to be gone?" Ning asked. "We just have to confirm whether the information you gave us is true or not," the cardinal said. Ning rubbed his chin for a second as he mused about something. "I have a proposition for you if you will hear it." "What proposition?" the cardinal asked. "If I can capture this killer and hand it over to you guys, will you give me a chance to meet the Pope?" he asked. "I can't let you come close to the Pope," the cardinal said quickly. "I am given the task to protect him at all costs." Ning frowned for a moment. "But," the cardinal said for a moment, "I might be able to get you close to one of the two other cardinals. Will you do it for that?" "The Cardinal of Coins?" Ning asked. "If you wish to," the cardinal said. Ning smiled and reached out for a handshake. "It's a deal then," he said. The cardinal hesitated for a second before reaching out with his hands as well. He shook his hands and was relieved to find out that nothing happened to him. "If you won't mind, I will be needing her for whatever I will do tonight," Ning said. "Tonight?" The cardinal gave a look of surprise. "Of course," Ning said. "Why would I waste time waiting at all? I'll do it as fast as I can." The cardinal couldn't help but be rather suspicious about it all. "You are not acquainted with this criminal, are you?" he asked. "No," Ning said. "Never even seen the man. I only know about him." The cardinal still held on to the wooden box with the dagger, so he didn't think Ning was lying at all. "All right," he said. "I will wait for whatever you will do. Just don't do anything illegal." Ning smiled and nodded. "If that is all, then I will leave right away. The sooner I can get to this criminal, The sooner I can be done with my work here, Ning said and stood up. Until we meet again, he said and walked out. I was so scared, Tim said as they walked down the stairs to return to their hotel. Serious, I didn't even speak once in front of him, Jasmine said. You guys need to learn to speak a little more, Ning said. Why would you be scared of anybody? Jasmine looked back at Ning. But that was not anybody. That was a cardinal. If this were a regular kingdom, that person would be akin to a prince. Do you know how nerve-wracking that is? Huh, I suppose that is true, Ning said. Still, don't take it lying down. Learn to stand up for yourself. That's something only you could say, Jasmine said, sighing a little. Gallimore and Tanaya followed them half a step behind, letting the three of them continue walking down ahead of them. Are you all right, my lady? Gallimore asked Tanaya. I understand that being close to the Cardinal of Life can be scary. It was indeed a little scary, Tanaya said. Is he always that serious, if you don't mind me asking? Yes, Gallimore said with a simple smile, but that is for his benefit. He gets to do his work better that way. Cardinal of Life, he cares about the people I suppose, Tanaya said. In his heart, he must love everyone. Something like that, Gallimore said. Walking down the flight of stairs was much faster than climbing, so the group arrived back at level 2 in just an hour and a half. After returning, Ning turned toward the Gallimore and Tanaya. I expect both of you to be here later tonight, he said. I will, Tanaya said. 9 o'clock. I'll be here, Gallimore said and walked away. Ning and the others returned to their room, and Ning instructed them to go to sleep as they would be busy later tonight. Tim was simply too tired from having to walk up and down for so long, so the moment he jumped on the bed, he fell asleep. He woke up to Ning calling his name with a light shake. It was hard to even tell where he was at first, but as he came out of sleep, he realized what he was to do soon. What time is it? He asked. Close to 9. Go get ready, we'll be leaving in a few minutes, Ning said. As Tim prepared, Jasmine walked into the room and sat on one of the beds. Do you know where this murderer is? She asked. In the Canary Hotel, over on Greytree Road, Ning explained. He's been staying there for a while now, so it should be easy. Let's hope so, the girl said. Tim got ready soon enough and they met up with Gallimore and Tanaya outside before making their way to Greytree Road. The place was named as such because of a massive tree that used to be there a long time ago, that apparently had a fully gray trunk as though it was perpetually covered in ashes. Now, the tree was no more, and in its stead was a park created and dedicated to it. Ning and the group arrived at an all-night cafe close to the Canary Hotel and stopped. All right, do we just go in now? Gallimore asked. What do we do? I do nothing, Ning said. You find the serial killer. Ning sat on one of the tables and leaned against his hands. Go find him and capture him. Between you four, you should be able to do something about him. Sir Ning. You can't do this. How are we supposed to catch a serial killer? What if he kills us? Tim asked. Ning gave a weird look. You will be going with one of the best paladins and a very well-respected police officer, who I assume has had a lot of training. You will be fine, he said. Besides, you need to start learning how to properly use that treasure of yours, Ning said, pointing to the horn on his hips. Tim looked down at the horn and gave a solemn look. He thought for a moment and nodded. All right, I'll do it. Go, and find him. I'll be there if you need any help, he said. Tim walked away with Jasmine following behind them. Tanaya stopped for a moment and looked at Ning. Are you seriously not coming? She asked. No, Ning answered. Now go before he runs away or something. Tanaya hurried away at those words. Tim blew his horn as softly as he could and searched for what could help him. In his immediate vicinity, all he could find were cats, rats, dogs, some birds, and other small beasts. Tim paused for a moment and chose a dog. He believed the dog would be the best help for him here. When the dog came, he could finally see that it was a medium-sized dog with short fur and a dark snout. It growled per Tim's orders, showing a yellow fang to the group. You can control the dog? Tanaya asked. That's what my treasure is for, Tim said. Do you guys have treasures I should be aware of? I don't have any, Tanaya answered. I would have brought our family's belt, Gallimore said. But it's not a battle-oriented treasure. The fact that one of us even has any is a surprise on its own. What if we had two? Jasmine asked and suddenly went invisible. What? Gallimore looked around to search for Jasmine, but he couldn't see her anywhere. He reached out to see if she was still there when his hand was swatted away. I can still be touched. Put those hands away, she said. Oh, sorry, he said. You never mentioned you had a divine treasure during any of our dates. I wasn't intending to give away too much information, Jasmine said. Anyway, it would be too weird if we all went in as invisible, but I can make the dog and one other person invisible. Who wants to go in unseen? Gallimore and Tim walked into the hotel, making their way to the registration area. Hello, I would like to meet one of your guests, please. Gallimore spoke to the concierge at the hotel at the time. The petite woman looked up and nearly jumped out of her seat when she saw a paladin stand up next to her. A paladin visiting the hotel, this late at night, in level 2 was something quite unusual. I'm sorry, did you say you want to meet a guest? The woman asked. Yes, I am looking for a guest of yours, Gallimore said. Who might you be looking for? The woman asked. His name is Breval, Gallimore said. I wish to meet him. Breval. The woman took out the register and started looking through the name list. Halfway through the book, she stopped and looked up. Actually, Sir Paladin. We cannot tell you about our guests. Please forgive me. Gallimore had expected that. The fact that he had gotten the woman to bring the book up itself was something he hadn't expected to happen. He thought for a moment and said, Is there no way for you to go and tell this person that I wish to meet him? If you know what room he is staying in, you can go. Or you can tell us and we will go get him for you, she said. Tim looked at the woman. How many rooms are there in this hotel? He asked. Around 140 across 7 floors. Give or take, the woman said. I see, Tim said. He looked toward Gallimore, wondering what they should do. Gallimore thought for a bit and looked back at the woman. Miss, please help us. This man is a dangerous man. You have to tell us where he's staying. If not that, then please at least tell us if he's really here. That would be a lot of help, he said. However, the woman only shook her head. We cannot divulge guest information in any manner, she said. My humblest apologies. Miss, please. Thank you, miss, Tim said hurriedly. Thank you for your help. He pulled Gallimore away. Gallimore resisted a little to being pulled, but he didn't stop entirely. What are you doing? We need more information, he said. We already have it, Tim said. Huh? Gallimore stopped as he was taken aback. What do you mean we already have it? Didn't you hear what I said? Jasmine asked while invisible. Gallimore looked around to where her voice was coming from. What do you mean? He asked. Jasmine sighed. He wasn't listening to me at all, he said. He was too busy in his own world. Wait, what do you mean? Explain it to me, Gallimore demanded. I already checked the register. I know where that man is. We don't need to wait around here anymore, Jasmine said. Ah. Gallimore finally reacted. You should have said so sooner. Let's go. He didn't hear the exasperated sigh that Jasmine let out again. The place where the man named Breval was staying was on the 4th floor of the hotel, in the 20th room at the end of the hallway. Gallimore walked up front with the other 3 following close behind. Arriving at the door, Gallimore knocked on it and waited. He waited for a moment and knocked again, louder this time around, and finally heard some movement from the other side. Some rustling and then some footsteps, followed by some clicking around the door. Finally, the door opened just a bit as a man in his late 30s with scraggly hair and beard looked at them. He could only see Gallimore and Tim, but even then he looked suspicious of them. Who are you guys? He asked. I am Gallimore, a paladin of the Church of Zarinus. Gallimore introduced himself. Are you Breval? The man looked at Gallimore with a serious expression on his face and opened the door a little more. He seemed to be in a gown, ready to go to sleep. How may I help you, Sir Paladin? The man asked. So you are Breval? Gallimore asked. I am, the man said. He looked toward Tim. Are you a paladin as well? No, I'm just a friend that came along with him, Tim said. Oh, you should be a paladin too if that is what you're trying to do. Everyone should become a paladin, the man said and bowed a little toward Gallimore. Gallimore wasted no more time. He pulled out a sword and pointed it at the man in front of him. Breval, for the crimes of murdering many people, I will now take you under arrest, Gallimore said. Come with me without resisting. Breval's eyes went wide in shock. What are you say, Sir Paladin? He asked. You might have gotten someone wrong. I don't know if I did, the young man said. If I did, you will be returned here tomorrow with no harm done to you. For now, I will take you with me to figure out the truth of whether you are a serial killer or not. No, the man said. I'm not a serial killer. He slowly moved backward, away from Gallimore and his sword. You will do better to not resist me, Gallimore said. If you do, I will execute you right here for trying to evade justice. Come with me so I may settle it fairly. No, please, no, the man leaned against the desk next to the wall, trying to push in further where there was no stop. Accept my offer and come with me. Just as Gallimore had started saying something, the man pulled out something from behind him where the drawers were. Gallimore didn't know what was being brought out, but his training kicked in and he stepped forward, slashing his sword at whatever the man was bringing out. He slashed at the man, but missed by barely an inch as the man took the gun he brought out and shot it. As the bullet arrived before the woman, she smiled and kept watching. Even as the bullet passed through her forehead, she kept her smile and watched Breval with unblinking eyes. Breval's face slowly twisted as his laughter faded and a look of confusion appeared before him. He slowly moved forward as he forced the bullet to move back through the woman's head again. Once again, the woman didn't flinch at all. He arrived right next to the woman and placed his palm on her body. He felt a slight bit of force before his hand suddenly passed through her body and arrived on the other side. Trickery, he suddenly said. You are using trickery against me. He looked around, trying to see where the final person was. It won't work. Your trickery won't stop me. Your friends will be long dead before that. Oh, the woman before him spoke. And why is that? Breval started giggling again. If you do anything to stop me, you will have revealed your presence to me. The moment I know you are present, you lose, he said. I have killed dozens like this. You will either find yourself dead or down with a massive headache and then dead pretty soon. I don't have it yet, the woman said. Breval punched through her face and the woman's face twisted, disappearing. I don't, he said. But I will soon. He slowly moved around the room, moving his arm around to see if he could touch her. He even grabbed a wooden stick that he had been using as a walking stick these past months to try and hit whoever was still invisible. It took him a moment of focus to remember that he was still hurt. He looked down and saw blood slowly dripping down his thigh and leg, all the way down to the floor. Whatever had bitten him earlier had left quite the wound. Damn it, Breval thought. There's that too. What's wrong? You hurt? A young girl with twin tails appeared with a mocking smile on her face. Breval moved instinctively and smashed his stick through the girl's face only to realize that she was not real at all. Another illusion? He asked. How many can you do before you find yourself unable to resist the pain? How many people can you focus on before you find yourself unable to resist the pain? A slightly tall young man appeared out of nowhere and asked him. Breval poked the young man strongly and the stick went through the body. He heard some grunting and turned around to see the paladin and the young man standing once again, defending each other with their sword once again. The bullet was still making its way toward them slowly. Breval stopped looking at them. He didn't need to look at them. The moment their senses moved away from the bullet, they would fall to the ground with a head full of pain and be unable to do anything. He had killed many people like this and knew he had nothing to care about. He had even fought people with guns who were incapable of doing anything to him as the moment they switched focus, they were unable to keep their heads straight. How many men have you killed until now? A tall girl with beautiful blonde hair appeared before the man. The man simply struck her and moved past her as soon as he realized that she was an illusion again. Where are you hiding? He asked. You can't be far away to create such intricate illusions. Tell me where you are right now. In your dreams, another illusion appeared next to the man. This time, it carried a gun with it. The woman that was the illusion shot the gun and Breval threw himself to the ground to protect himself. To him, every illusion could be the real deal, so he had to remain careful. Another two illusions appeared in front of him, all of the same men time. They both had guns in their hand and they both shot at Breval at the same time. Breval could not take any chances, so he dodged the moment he could. He threw himself sideways as the illusion bullets flew past him. Breval grunted as he slowly got up. The images were one thing, but the sound was so realistic that he could swear each of the bullets was actually being fired. He looked back up to see who else had stood up and his eyes went wide in horror. A dozen different people of all shapes and sizes stood in the middle of his room, all of whom slowly raised their guns toward the man. "No," the man said. His eyes flashed through everyone, using the time he had been given to pick and choose every single one of the people. Once done, he waited for one of them to fall down with migraine and headache, and yet, not a single one did. "No," he shouted. "How could there be not a single real one here?" All the illusions spoke at the same time. "If you think I will show myself, then you are gravely mistaken." As soon as they said that, they instantly shot the gun again. Braval instinctively moved again, even though he knew they weren't real. When he got up, there were more illusions in the room, all of which got ready to shoot again. Braval's eyes went wide in horror. They flashed left to right to catch every single one and had to go through them multiple times to check them all. If he missed a single one, then his powers wouldn't work. Just as he was doing that, something bit him on the right leg as well. The dog that he had beaten away long ago came back to bite him. Braval screamed in pain and smashed his gun on the dog's face. The whimpering dog kept biting, however, and Braval kept screaming. Just as he screamed, something smashed onto the side of his head, sending him reeling to the ground. Before he knew it, he had lost consciousness. Braval woke up with a blaring pain to the side of his head as well as a bunch of incoherent sounds of what sounded like people speaking. "As long as you target them they get hit with nausea and migraine. Damn, no wonder this bastard has been able to kill so many people without anyone realizing," a voice said. "WH. Who?" he called, but his voice was too soft for anyone to hear him. Looking around, he noticed 5 people on a table next to him, looking at something he could not see. But he had to concentrate on the people who he considers a target. Jasmine spoke. "I was right in doing what I did." Giving him too many targets helped him lose focus on Tim, who got the dog to bite the guy. "You did good," Ning said and looked toward Braval. "Oh, you're awake, Mr. Serial Killer. Who are you? What are you doing to me?" Braval asked, trying to stand up only to realize that he had been tied to the chair he was sitting in. "Don't worry, we will resolve this in a few moments," Gallimore said and turned toward the book of treasures that wrote about the gun. "This book is incredible, truly. How did you guys come across this?" he asked the group. "I had it for a while before I decided to give it to Tim," Ning said with a shrug. "I can't tell you where I got it from." "Okay, I won't question," Gallimore said. "I will question something else though." He held the gold and silver gun in his hand and looked at the group. "What do we do with this?" Ning thought for a moment. "It depends. Will it be useful at all? A bonded treasure needs its owner to die before it can be used by someone else," he said. "With the crimes he has committed, it is very much likely he will be executed," Gallimore said. "We just need to hear his confession." "No. No," Braval shouted. "Don't kill me. I beg of you." "Beg harder," Ning said and took a chair to sit by the man. "And while you beg, tell me why you like killing people so much. What sorry excuse do you have to become a serial killer? Also, who are you planning to kill this time around? Surely you didn't come to Aaron without any planning?" "No, I've never killed anyone. I don't know what you are talking about," Braval said. Ning thought for a bit. "Tim, bring the book over." Tim gave a surprised look and quickly brought the book of treasures over to Ning, placing it in front of him on the table. Ning spun the book around so the man could read it. He saw, "Bullet of Migraine," written on the page. He only read a couple of sentences when he realized he could see his name on the list. "This is the book of treasures that tells you everything about every treasure it comes into contact with. That includes the owner of said treasures and what he did with it." Ning pointed to the line where it wrote the names of people who had been killed by Braval using this gun. "We have the names of everyone you killed," Ning said. "You cannot try to talk your way out of this. Even if you can somehow convince us that you are not who we think you are, there is a treasure with the Cardinal of Life that can force you to speak the truth. So, it is better if you don't claim that you aren't who we think you are." Braval gulped and looked down at the page. "Now, I want you to explain this to me," Ning said, pointing to a line on the page. "Why you killed only the people who were related to the church. It almost feels like you have a vendetta against them." I. The man looked at the names and remembered the faces those names belonged to. Remembering, he felt the anger grow inside of him. "They deserved to die," he said softly. Anyone who follows Zerinus deserves to die. His head snapped around, staring at the paladin. You all deserve to die the most horrible death imaginable. I will pray for nothing but misery on you all. Saying as much, Breval slammed his head on the table in front of him a few times until he lost consciousness. The few people gathered around the table looked around with confused looks. What was that all about? Jasmine asked. Tanaya walked up from the side. We should get him to the police station to get him to confess. Sir Gallimore, you should deal with this quickly. The sooner we can tell everyone about his capture, the sooner the world can go back to feeling safer. Gallimore thought for a moment and nodded. I will leave. Sir Ning, I will talk to my father about meeting you. If he agrees, which I think he will, I will contact you, Gallimore said. He will have to agree. I helped you guys capture a serial killer and all, Ning said. I will make sure they know that, Gallimore said and turned to leave. However, before he walked away, he looked around. Where's the gun? Tim was about to hand it over when Ning grabbed it from him. I have decided to keep the gun, Ning said. Gallimore was taken aback a little. I suppose you earned it, he said. Do you really need it though? No, Ning said. It's not that useful of a treasure for us. However, just because its effect is useless, doesn't mean the treasure is either. Gallimore was confused. What do you mean? He asked. Tell your Cardinal of Coins that I will give this gun to him when he comes to meet me, preferably in the same meeting as when I meet your father, Ning said. Until then, I will be keeping it. Goodbye. Ning healed the dog that was with them before returning to the hotel with Tim and Jasmine. As he walked back, he seemed lost in thought the entire way through, thinking about something. Tim and Jasmine did not say anything for a while, but soon enough curiosity took over. Sir Ning, are you all right? One of them asked. You have been quiet the whole time. Oh yeah. Sorry, Ning said. I was just thinking about the guy and why he was killing people. It's weird. Yeah, he was only killed religious people, Tim said. I wonder why that was. He was an orphan, Ning said. Raised in an orphanage, like you. Jasmine looked at Ning with slightly wide eyes. And he killed people because of that? She asked. Yes, Ning said. Something like that. It seems to have to do with a lot of repressed emotions from his childhood where he was traumatized due to events that happened by the caretakers in the orphanage. They're like that, Jasmine said. They do good that they take care of orphans. But they also doctrine them to become the biggest religious zealots for Zerinus. And if you show signs of refusal, they beat you until you do. I told you why I ran away from my orphanage, didn't I? You did, Ning said. Well, anyway. Let's forget about him. In a day or two, we should be meeting with Gallimore's father, the Cardinal of Justice. I'm a little scared to meet him actually, Tim said. I wonder if he's just as intense as that other cardinal. We'll have to see, Ning said. They returned back to their hotel and went to sleep for the day. For the next 2 days, Ning did nothing but wait for Gallimore to come to visit him with the good news, only to be left without any notice. Another 2 days passed once again, making Ning wonder if he had been duped or something. Finally, on the 5th day, Gallimore showed up at the hotel and called Ning out to talk with him. What took you so long? Ning asked him as soon as he saw him outside the hotel. Do you know how long you kept me waiting? Gallimore grimaced a little and gave a small bow of apology. I'm sorry, but it took time to get what you wanted, he said. But I worked hard, so I was able to do it. Oh, Ning said with a pleased smile. So your father finally accepted? Oh, no, Gallimore said. I mean, yes, but my father accepted your meeting long ago. It was Cardinal Elias who took time to accept your offer. Wait, Cardinal Elias? Ning asked. You asked the Cardinal of Coins to meet us too? Yes, Gallimore said. That's what you requested, wasn't it? That was, Ning said. Then, does that mean the reason why you were so late was because you spent your time trying to get both the cardinals to agree to my request? Yes, Gallimore said. That and I had to deal with the criminal Breval and his hanging. I don't know if you heard or not, but he was hanged to death yesterday in the Justice Plaza. Ning shook his head. I haven't gone out really, he said. I didn't notice any news. I see, he said. Anyway, the criminal is dead, and news of his death should spread throughout the world in a few days. The world has become a slightly safer place. It certainly has, Ning said. Then, about meeting those cardinals, when do I leave? They have requested that I bring you there later in the afternoon. If you can't, I will have to return quickly and let them know that you won't be able to make it. That's all right, Ning said. I have plenty of time to make it. As soon as that, Ning, Tim, and Jasmine were on their way to the level 1 section of Aaron, where the high-ranking members of the church stayed. Getting to level 1 took some time, but surprisingly not as much as Ning thought it would. As they went higher, the number of people and buildings lessened significantly as well, allowing for a more or so empty region where people could stay in without having to deal with other people. This place is entirely for the church and individuals of the church to be in, Gallimore explained as they rode a small car from level 2. People are allowed to be here from early morning at 6 a.m. to until 2 p.m. during the day so that they can get a glance of His Holiness. Does the Pope come out regularly? Ning asked. No, not regularly, Gallimore explained. But regularly enough that people have a high chance of catching him if they wait for him here. Ning slowly nodded to himself. They were stopped once along the way to check who they were. As soon as they saw a piece of paper that Gallimore showed them, they let him go easily. The houses were white this far up in the mountain, with beautiful gardens filling the side path and the many buildings beyond. Tim and Jasmine were in absolute awe as they watched every building and wall that they came across. Tim especially excitedly asked questions and wrote down the answers whenever Gallimore gave any. They passed past a large ground with people hung by large wooden posts. Tim and Gallimore only saw bodies from far away, but Ning could see Braval directly. It seemed he was hurt a lot before he was hung. What do people get hanged for usually? Ning asked Gallimore. Mostly, for murder and rape and blasphemy and... Blasphemy? Against Zerinus? Ning asked. Of course, Gallimore said. We cannot let those who speak ill of the Lord remain alive. That's horrible, Jasmine said, refusing to elaborate further. Ning simply shook his head. Here we are, Gallimore said, turning everyone's attention toward the large building to their left with massive walls and intricate window frames. The car stopped and they walked out. Gallimore's house was a beautiful white mansion near the top of the mountain, with guarded gardens on either side. It was a 3-story tall mansion with beautifully designed windows all over the front and sides. A bunch of cars were parked outside of the mansion with church officials and guards in white patrolling the front constantly. There seemed to be some sort of path on the side of the house, but the car Ning and the rest were on stopped outside of the main doors to the building. Gallimore got off and helped Jasmine get out too. Ning and Tim got out on their own and stepped to the side as the car drove to the side where it parked amongst the dozens of others. Come with me, Gallimore said and walked up the small flight of stairs before passing through the main doors. When Ning and the rest tried to follow him, the guards crossed their spears, stopping them right there. Oh, right. You'll have to go through a search. I hope you don't mind, Gallimore said. Sure, Ning said and raised both arms to let the guard search them. After a minute or two of searches, all 3 of them were down a few pieces of jewelry and a horn. Gallimore looked at the box where everything was kept and looked back at Ning. You didn't bring the gun? He asked. Of course I did, Ning said as he produced the gold and silver pistol and showed it to Gallimore. The guards, who had just done completely searching Ning, were confused and quickly jumped to take the gun from his hands. However, before they could, Ning put away the gun. Please place the gun in the basket, one of the guards asked. What gun? Ning asked, raising his arms to let them search him. If you can find it, you can keep it. The guards desperately tried, but came up with nothing in the end. They had no idea where the gun could have possibly gone to. Gallimore was equally confused as well, but he had to stop this in the end. Let him be. We're meeting the cardinals and we can't be late, he said. The guards reluctantly let go of Ning. Ning walked into the mansion, arriving at a large corridor that led to the hall in the distance. The corridor was full of beautifully carved furniture with magnificent vases full of bright flowers growing from them. Colorful lights shined down from stained glass windows that were on the sides of the wall. There were also open windows that shone bright sunlight on the plants. Tapestries and paintings, depicting a heavenly Zerinus, filled the walls of the corridor. Ning looked at the imagery for Zerneus and realized that each one was a different interpretation of the artist, and thus not the correct one. He so desperately wished to find one that would just show him what the real Zerinus looked like. An old man with a crooked back walked to Gallimore and they spoke something in hushed voices. Ning could hear them talking about whether the other cardinal had arrived or not. He had not. My father is this way, Gallimore said, taking him deeper into the mansion. They arrived at a massive hall, once again filled to the brim with holy artifacts, paintings, tapestries, furniture, and stained windows that seemed to depict Zerinus once more. Several paladins stood around the hall with their swords to their waist as well as some with rifles next to them. On the couch sat an older man with a thick beard and a head full of hair more white than black. He looked toward Gallimore and the rest as they walked in. Gallimore bowed a little and spoke. I have returned with our guests, father. Allow me to introduce them. Gallimore swiftly went through the introductions and turned around to introduce his father. This is my father, the Cardinal of Justice, Farses Maris. A pleasure to meet you, Cardinal Farses, Ning said with the slightest of bows. Tim and Jasmine, however, showed more deference. The cardinal looked at Ning from his seat for a second too long before standing up and walking up to him. Ning watched the man walk right up to him and wondered what he would do next. However, the man surprised Ning by placing a hand in front of him. I heard you were looking for a handshake, he said. Thank you for helping us capture that serial killer. Ning smiled a little and took the man's hand in a shake. Link? Ning asked internally. He is a human and thus cannot be linked. That did it. The second cardinal was a human too. Now, Ning had to hope either of the other cardinal or the Pope was Zerinus. If not, his journey would start anew once more. Take a seat, the cardinal said and sat down on the couch. Ning and the others took the other couch, sitting opposite the cardinal. Never in their life would either Tim or Jasmine have ever imagined that they would be face to face with a cardinal from the Holy Church of Zerinus. Such an event was something they could not have imagined in all of their life. Refreshments were soon brought out with fresh fruits and drinks served for them. Ning took a cup of juice from freshly squeezed oranges that was quite cold to the touch. I heard Cardinal Marcus speak about you, the cardinal said. He said it was hard to judge you. Is that a persona of yours, or just something that you do naturally? Who knows? Ning said as he took a sip. The cardinal said nothing. And my son here tells me you are a fighter too. Is that true? I have indeed dabbled in fighting in my life, Ning said. I know of all countries in the world, and nowhere do I know where they still teach you how to fight with weapons anymore. It's all guns and rifles, the cardinal said. Would you mind going a few rounds with my students to see how good you are? Ning looked at the people that were gathered around him and the sword they held to their side. Are these your students? Ning pointed to the ones that were standing guard all around them. They are, the cardinal said. But not my best. You can go against them if you want to, but my son said you boasted about your abilities being quite above par. I must say it is not a boast on my part, Ning said. If you wish to see me fight, I will. Cardinal Elias seems as though he will be arriving a little late. Why don't we spend some time in the training field once you are rested, the cardinal said. Oh, no need for that. I'm well rested. We can start right away, Ning said. The cardinal raised an eyebrow. Very well, let us head on over if you wish for it. Tim and Jasmine were abruptly forced to leave their place and walk away to the battlefield that was behind the mansion. Overlooking the beautiful ocean was a large field of dead soil that had been tread upon so much that the chances of anything growing atop it in the near future were none at all. Half-naked men and women were training with swords, spears, as well as bows and arrows. The cardinal walked along with Ning, showing him how he trained his students. I am the Cardinal of Justice, meaning I overlook everything from the paladins of the church to the police departments of the country. Every single fighter out here is under me even when they work for the other cardinals. The only one who could take away their command from me is His Holiness and him alone. You have quite the army on your hand, Cardinal. How many trainee paladins do you have at a time here? Ning asked. Somewhere between 1,000 or 2, the cardinal said. They come from churches and orphanages all over the world to become a paladin and are trained right here. Orphanages? Ning asked before realizing. Ah, I heard orphanages have a lot of influence from the church. They are funded by the church all around the world, so that much is obvious, the cardinal said. In a way, you are just raising future paladins there, Ning said, giving the cardinal a strong glare at Ning. The cardinal coughed a little and pointed toward one of the men training in the distance. Go have Renan come here for me, he said. One of the paladins swiftly departed and went up to the young man, bringing him back. What need have you of me, honored cardinal? The young man named Renan asked. Renan, how long have you been training for? The cardinal asked. At this place? For 10 months, honored cardinal, the young man answered. Cardinal Farses nodded a little and gestured toward Ning. This guest of ours wishes to show us his mastery of weapons. You will assist him with that by being his opponent. Do you agree? The cardinal asked. Of course. I will be of help however I may be able to, the young man said before turning toward Ning. Please allow me to be your opponent, sir. Very well, Ning said and walked ahead. Come, let us fight. The young man quickly followed as someone else cleared the training field for just the two of them. Sweaty trainees formed a circle around them as the cardinal stood and watched as Ning and Renan returned from the weapons stand. Renan held a wooden sword, while Ning held a wooden spear with a rounded tip and sides. A spear? You're not a swordsman? The cardinal asked. I can use swords if you want me to, but I find spears to be what I lean toward the most, Ning said. No, use whatever you feel comfortable with, the cardinal said. Since this will be a simple practice round, please try not to hurt each other. And try to not attack the head, chest, or the nether regions. Keep your strikes on the arms and legs if you can. Both sides nodded to the cardinal's demand. Then, you may begin fighting. Renan gave a deep bow before charging toward Ning. His wooden sword was of average size, so he had to come quite close to Ning before striking at him. Ning moved his leg slightly to the side and dodged the sword slash while his spear moved at an impossible angle to stop right at the young man's throat. The young man could feel the dull tip of the spear barely touching the front of his neck and his breathing couldn't help but get faster and heavier. The surroundings seemed to quiet at once with no one making a single sound. Everyone who trained there knew that Renan was one of the best trainees in recent years, which was why the cardinal had chosen him at all. He was a prodigy in sword who could take in teaching about the sword like a sponge took in water. He soaked all the knowledge and made use of it so efficiently that one could hardly tell that he had only been training for just about a year at all. The cardinal's eyes were wide in shock as well. He saw how effortless Ning made his move look, but he knew more than anyone else that it was not effortless at all. It was a practiced move that was made to look effortless because of the many hours Ning must have put into training with the spear. The cardinal couldn't imagine how else one would be so efficient. Tim and Jasmine were equally surprised as well. They knew Ning could do many things, but weapons were not one of them. They had been surprised by all the magical things Ning had done, but this was not magic at all. It was pure skill born by training. They could only imagine how many other secrets Ning was probably holding back to himself. Ning pulled back away from the stunned young man and smiled. Again. Renan battled Ning multiple times, losing each time in a couple of attacks. Each time he lost, he came back to fight with hope and yearning that this would be the fight where he would best Ning. Ning stepped to the side as Renan came with another slash, dodging it once more. This time around, Renan seemed to understand this was going to happen, so he stopped as soon as he could and swung the sword sideways. Ning closed in toward the young man, completely arriving into his personal space such that the sword swing ended up meaning nothing. Ning pushed the man backward and lunged forward with the spear, striking into his right shoulder. As soon as the stab connected, he pulled back the spear and changed targets. His footwork shifted him to the right as he hit the young man's left shoulder as well. The young man stumbled backward and completely flipped over before coming to a halt on the floor. He coughed and grunted in pain while Ning stood emotionless as though what he had done just then was not something incredible. Ning waited for the young man to get up, but then realized that he may have hit the young man a little too hard. After all, the young man had been training all this time and was most likely quite tired. He looked back at the cardinal, who seemed to be processing what had happened himself. After thinking for a moment, he quickly ordered Renan to be taken out and cared for. The chances of him being seriously injured were none, but the cardinal still wanted the young man out of there immediately. You were very talented indeed, he said. How long did it take you to acquire this level of skill? Oh, well. A very long time, Ning said with a soft sigh. I had to spend years training. You're still so very young. Just how long could you have spent in training? The cardinal asked. Trust me, it's a lot, Ning said. I see, the cardinal said as he saw Ning not wanting to answer and moved away from the topic. Do you wish to continue this or should we call it off? Whatever you wish, Ning said. I understand the other cardinal will be taking some time, so I have some time to spare of my own. That he will, the cardinal said and looked to the side and gestured with his head. Gallimore walked toward his father and stopped next to him. Would you mind if I test your spear skills against my son's sword skills? The cardinal asked. He's been training a lot longer than the young man from earlier, and I think is thus much more fitting to be your opponent. Ning acted as though he was thinking for a moment and shrugged. Sure, why not? He said. Before he knew it, he was standing before the young Gallimore, ready to fight once more. Same rules as before. Don't attack where it would hurt. Stick to limbs and shoulders, the cardinal said. Begin. Gallimore gave a bow as he readied to fight Ning. Ning bowed back all the same and the battle truly began. Gallimore moved laterally, going around Ning, trying to look for an opening. Any opening. However, even as he wasted precious seconds looking for an opening to strike, he found none. He knew something like this was going to happen after seeing Ning's fight with the young man Renan, but being directly in front of him put things into perspective so much more clearly. Ning's entire body seemed relaxed and barely even ready for a fight. But when looking deeper, one could notice just how easy it was for Ning to move and block any attacks. Gallimore frowned as he realized that he hadn't been doing anything in all that time and was instead simply walking around normally. No, I must act, he thought, and found what small opening he could possibly exploit to make into a better opening and rushed forward. He attacked from Ning's left side. As Ning was right-handed, and currently held a spear with his right hand, his reaction was bound to be slower than if he were holding it with his left hand. Gallimore moved right next to Ning and stabbed him. Ning suddenly moved forward, escaping the man's attack while he left behind his spear standing still. The stabbed sword moved in between Ning and the standing spear, which was starting to tilt and fall on the opposite side of Ning. Ning tilted as well, to the other side than the spear, and stepped on the base of the spear with his right leg, while with his left leg he stopped the spear from falling to the other side. At the same time, using the base and his right leg as the fulcrum, Ning pulled the spear back toward him, slamming Gallimore's sword as it came toward him. The spear fell completely, but so had Ning. He was barely stopping himself from planting his face on the ground. He pushed against the ground and tossed his spear into the air. As Gallimore recovered from the attack and went for a strike, Ning spun himself around his blade and caught the falling spear with his hands behind his back, the tip of the spear pointed at Gallimore's throat. Gallimore paused in surprise as he didn't understand what had happened at all. All he could tell was that Ning had fallen, tossed his spear, and then somehow caught it as he came back up. That had been truly one of the most bizarre things he had seen during any training at all. Gallimore was not the only person surprised. Everyone in the surroundings had been surprised by the bizarre display of skills. Many found the display not to belong to spear skills at all, and yet somehow Ning had won the match clearly. It was his spear that was at Gallimore's throat. That was an interesting show of skills, Gallimore said. It certainly was, wasn't it? Ning said as he held onto the spear and checked it up close to see if he had harmed it in some way. What was that even? It looked like gymnastics more so than anything, Gallimore said. It was, Ning said. I wasn't doing anything particular or anything. I was just doing what felt right. He slammed the spear on the ground twice and checked the vibrations. Everything seemed pretty good with the spear, and he hadn't broken anything. So, shall we continue? Ning asked. Of course, Gallimore said and moved back. Once he was ready, he attacked again. He started with a diagonal slash so that Ning couldn't find a way to escape from any direction. Ning parried the attack with the shaft of his spear, moving it out of the way and in a completely opposite direction. Gallimore recovered immediately and rushed forward with a quick strike. Ning blocked with this spear at first, and then dodged it for the second strike, before completely parrying it on the third strike. By the fourth strike, Ning was already in the lead, attacking before Gallimore could recover. He managed to attack Gallimore's shoulders before Gallimore managed to force himself away from Ning and outside of the range of his attacks. Ning had absolutely no intention of going after Gallimore if Gallimore had gained distance between the two. Gallimore took a moment or two to recover himself before coming after Ning. Ning decided to help the young man keep some dignity and keep it easy for him. His fight with Gallimore lasted about 15 minutes in total, in which he had let Gallimore fight to the best he could. By the end, despite losing to Ning, Gallimore was very happy to have been Ning's partner for many of the matches today. Someone arrived next to the cardinal and whispered something into the man's ears. Ahem. The cardinal caught Ning's attention. Ning moved his eyes away from the disastrous fight and looked toward the cardinal. The cardinal of coins has arrived, the cardinal said. While this practice match yours has been incredible, if you wish to, we can go meet him right away. Ah, he's here, is he? Ning said and quickly looked at the people in the fields. I'm sorry if any of you guys wanted to fight with me. I must leave you all alone. Ning walked away, arriving next to the cardinal. You showed an impressive battle today, the cardinal said. If you wish to, I can keep you here as a trainer. I have no need for any of that, Ning said. I'm doing fine as a jobless man until now. The cardinal tried to persuade Ning quite hard, but Ning wouldn't budge. Since he had decided to not join any sort of organization, the cardinal had an impossible job outside of that. Tim and Jasmine quickly came by and offered up some congratulations to Ning. Ning didn't need that, but they still gave him one. Gallimore walked behind his father, somewhat hurt, but also with a look of defeat and understanding on him. He stayed quiet as the group returned back to the mansion. Arriving at the hall room, Ning saw a thin man sitting on the sofa, drinking some sort of tea. Elias. Good to have you here, brother, the Cardinal Farces walked up to the new man. Farces, the thin man said and bowed toward the Cardinal of Justice. Cardinal Farces bowed back in respect and introduced the group to the Cardinal. When it came to Ning's name, the Cardinal of Coins looked surprised. So, is it you who wishes to see me? Yes, it is me, Ning said as he reached forward for a handshake. I am Ning. It is a pleasure to meet with you, Cardinal Elias. The thin man remained with an emotionless face, with his hands by his side as he stared at Ning's hands for a few moments. Ning gave a dry laugh. Are you going to leave me hanging like that? He asked. Why do you wish to shake my hand? The man asked. I am told that this is what you have been wanting to do with all of us cardinals and His Holiness, but it makes no sense to me. Why? It's just a handshake, Ning said, but I am also told that this will lead to my death or one of our deaths, the man said. That makes me reluctant to shake your hand. Ning frowned a little. Forgive me, but I won't be shaking your hand without knowing explicitly what I am getting myself into, the man said. Ning stared at the man for a bit and wondered if this was Zerinus, hiding himself in plain sight. He decided to learn some more before getting into the touch aspect of his quest. Very well, Ning said and sat down on the couch opposite him as he brought out a pistol. As soon as the pistol was out, several swords came out of their sheaths, and multiple rifles were cocked in his direction. Ning slowed down and slowly raised one hand while lowering the other toward the desk where he placed it just as slowly. Down. The Cardinal of Justice ordered and the guns were put down, the swords slowly being sheathed once more. The Cardinal then turned toward Ning. Never do that again without telling us before, he said and sat down beside the other Cardinal, reaching for the gun. Before he could get to it, though, Ning placed his 2 feet across the table, hiding the gun underneath. You get the gun once I get the handshake, Ning said. I won't have it any other way. The Cardinal of Coins paused for a long moment and looked toward Gallimore. I was told by you that I would have to come here to meet him for the gun, was I not? He asked. Why did you fail to mention anything about the handshake? I don't remember verbatim what was said all those days ago, but I'm pretty sure the letter I sent to you had exactly what Sir Ning told me. I wrote that as soon as I could so as to not forget, Gallimore said. And the letter only mentioned that just me coming here to meet you would be enough for that gun. Was the young man wrong about that? The Cardinal of Coins asked. He is sure. Ning paused and thought back to the night when they captured Braval and everyone went their own way. Shit, he thought. No, he was right, he answered. Ning shook his head in disappointment. He was so lost in thought about why Braval had chosen to do what he did, that he had completely not cared what he said exactly. To be fair, he never thought that he would have to be so careful either. He had thought the meaning behind his wish for the Cardinal to be here would be clear, but as that was not what he had asked for, that was not what he was going to receive today it seemed. It is too late to change what I want from you, Ning asked. The Cardinal of Justice frowned, while the Cardinal of Coins simply shrugged. You are free to make that decision, Cardinal Elias said. After all, the only thing we got from you was your words, and I understand words can be flimsy and quickly changing. Ning glared at the man and ended up being unsure if he was trying to be sarcastic or not. The man gave no information away in his expression. "Fine," he said and put down his leg. "That gun is yours. I stick to my word." Gallimore's father looked rather surprised by Ning refusing to change his words when he had the chance to. As for the Cardinal Eli's, he simply nodded as that was the right choice here. The thin man took the gun and looked at it all over, seeing as though he wanted to see everything he could. "Have you bonded with this gun yet?" he asked Ning. "I haven't touched it since the day we caught those criminals," Ning said. "You can bond it right now and see." The Cardinal of Coins took it and attempted to shoot it before stopping. "No, someone more worthy of it should own it," he said before placing it down. "Thank you for giving it to us for such a small price. If we can do anything for you." "Actually, beside getting you in touch with the Pope," the Cardinal stopped Ning before he could intervene. "We will happily do it for you." Ning put on a grumpy look and sighed a little, thinking about what could he want that was not a handshake with the Pope. "Would you mind telling me about the church then?" Ning asked. "Like who does what? Where do most of the laws come from, and who is overall the most important person besides you and the Pope?" The two cardinals looked at each other, trying to gauge each other's response, and shrugged. "This isn't really a big secret, so we can tell you," Cardinal Farces said. Cardinal Elias nodded and started explaining things. Ning listened to everything clearly, trying to remember names and their influence in the church. There were many names thrown around, from archbishops to bishops and other paladins as well. However, in the end, Ning realized that there was no one more influential in the church than just the three cardinals and the Pope. So, if anyone in the church was going to be Zerinus, it would have to be one of the four of them. And given Ning already checked the other two, he only had two more people to go through. The Cardinal of Coins prepared to leave. He stood up and gave a small nod toward the entire group before walking away from the couch. However, when he was about to walk out of the hall, he stopped and turned toward Ning. "Actually, I feel really bad for having you come all the way here without you getting what you want," the Cardinal said. "So, if you can tell me why you want the handshake in a way I can understand, I will give it to you. Forgive me, if I failed to realize what you wanted beforehand. I'm known to be a bit blockheaded, as my mother liked to call it." "I'm looking for someone," Ning said. "To kill someone." "Precisely. I don't know what he looks like, or who he currently is. The only thing I have a guess on, just because of its high possibility, is that he would be someone influential. I came to meet the Pope because he is one of the most influential people on the planet, so I wanted to see if he was the person," Ning said. "And why is two?" the man asked. "Because you guys are quite influential as well," Ning said. "That's all." The Cardinal paused for a moment, thinking about something. "When you say someone influential, you do not just talk about religion, right?" "No," Ning said. "I have many people on my list." "How many have you crossed from the list?" the Cardinal asked. "Actually, this is the first place I came to, so not at all really," Ning said. "I see. And what characteristic would this person have that you would recognize them in just a single handshake?" the Cardinal asked. "I cannot tell you," Ning said. "I'm not trying to hide anything by saying that. I truly cannot tell you how I would figure it out. I wouldn't even know how to begin." "Do you use a treasure?" the man asked. "No, it is just something that I can do," Ning said. "No treasures." "Ah." The Cardinal of Coins slowly returned back into the hall, approaching the table again. "So you are a chosen of the great Lord Zerneus as well?" Ning took a moment to take in what was said just now. "Sorry, what?" he asked. "A chosen of the great Lord Zerinus," the man repeated. "Yes, I heard you the first time," Ning said. "What do you mean chosen?" "Oh, you must not be aware then," the man said. "I wonder how you aren't aware. Is it not public information? I'm usually bad with those." Cardinal Elias, Cardinal Farces suddenly spoke. "Let me handle this." Oh, okay. Thank you," the Cardinal of Coins said. The Cardinal of Justice turned toward Ning and started explaining. "From time to time, Zerinus chooses someone young to bless with powers that one would not have normally. They are very rare and very hard to find, but they are there. It is said that those that were chosen by Zerinus to receive these powers are people who Zerinus wants directly under him," the man said. "And because of that, one of the main rules to anyone becoming the Pope is that they must be chosen of Zerinus." Ning's eyes widened slightly. He didn't have information on this part of this world's energy. He wondered if it was really Zarinus doing this or just another thing he took wrongfully credit for. Ning's eyes slowly moved back to Tim, who was slowly realizing the same thing as well. He was blessed as well. As for Zarinus or not, Ning would have to wait and see. For now, these people here believed that he was blessed in the same way. Could he exploit this in any way? Do you believe I can be a pope then? Ning asked. Popes remain the pope until the day they die, the Cardinal of Coins said, and His Holiness still has many years ahead of him. But you can get started in the church in preparation for becoming the pope in the next many years. You are young, so you wouldn't be losing too many years either. Ning thought for a moment and didn't know how to answer. Here, the Cardinal of Coins said something, grabbing Ning's attention. Ning turned around and saw the Cardinal leaning next to him with his hand open in front of him, gesturing for a shake. Ning moved to shake his hand and stopped, looking up at the man. Are you sure? He asked. I can find some other way to get you to shake my hands. No, this is fine, the man said. In fact, I insist. Ning gave a weird look and grabbed the hand before shaking it. As he had imagined, the man wasn't Zarinus either. He was just a random human once again. You were quite brave to do this after I said that you could die, Ning said. Am I dying? The Cardinal asked. No, you're safe, absolutely, Ning said. I thought so, the Cardinal said and stood up straight. There is no way our god Zarinus would send one of his chosen to kill us. You are here to help us. Zarinus has a vision for you, and you will see it finished. Okay. Ning said softly. I guess I'm a puppet now. Chosen, not a puppet, the Cardinal of Coins said quickly and seemed to suddenly be lost in thoughts. I must tell the Pope about this. Another one of the chosen hasn't been found in a long time. This is great information. He turned to all of them. I will leave for now. I will see you later, he said only to Ning and left. See me later? Ning asked and looked toward the Cardinal in front of him. The Cardinal nodded. As one chosen by Zarinus, you have a chance and right to meet His Holiness and get his blessing to officially become one of the chosen ones. Oh, Ning said with an excited look on his face. Does that mean I'm meeting the Pope? It was unsure when exactly they would get to meet the Pope, but Cardinal Farces had promised him that it wouldn't be longer than just a few days. In the time they remained there, Ning spent his time with the training paladins to help them learn more about fighting and learn more about them as well. After spending enough time with them, he had come to learn that these people came from all around the world. Some had even crossed the Great Reef to come here. A few of these were orphans who had been brainwashed from a young age to believe in Zarinus and had thus intended to come here from the start. Gallimore had his job to do going around the city. As the serial killer was dead now, and Ning was there, the city needed to be checked one last time before it was time for the Pope to make the decision to go on a parade. Ning did see the Pope the next day, a thin man standing high on his balcony as he waved down below. But he was so far away that Ning could get nothing on him, and he didn't want to just jump right up to him and grab him. There was no point in doing that. Instead, he waited, not like he had much to do. Jasmine was similar to Ning in that she didn't have anything to do either. Worse, she couldn't even spend her time doing anything at all like Ning had with the trainees. So, she spent her days walking around the level 1 area, visiting different places in the area that she could only do while she was up there. Tim, on the other hand, felt as though he had struck gold. In the Cardinal Farsaw's library, there were tomes and books from long ago, information that Tim so very wanted. He spent his days in the library, reading and learning more and more. There was information here that even the University of Tremala would be hard-pressed to come across. They had a good library for sure, but it was not so well curated as the Cardinal's library, which had not only the best of books, but also the best books from all around the world. The first thing Tim read about was the maps of the world. The maps he saw back in the university were nothing compared to what he got to see here. Novelfire, novelfire.net. Names from places all over the world filled him, especially the ones beyond the Great Reef. The Morgian Empire was great and all, but there were many significant names in the Northern Hemisphere as well. The country of Evenine, the Kingdom of Viridia, the Kingdom of Hisahar, the Republic of Line, and so many other names quickly filled Tim's mind. Beyond that, he also learned a lot about the history of the world as well as the church and more. All in all, he had the best time of his life in the few days he got to stay there. On the fourth day of staying there, Ning and the rest were finally told that the Pope would see them that day. Ning and the rest left with the cardinal and made their way to the building where the Pope resided. The Zurin Palace was a four-storied building with many windows of repeating design that was tall and wide. It was a massive palace where everyone from the church spent their time. It was practically the palace of the royalties of the country, so it was understandable why the place was so extravagant. Ning and the other two were taken into the building, and they quickly started showing signs of awe at the interior. Beautiful paintings hung on the inside wall, with intricate patterns both carved and painted into the walls. Tapestries hung from the side, perfectly reflected in the plain and polished white marble that covered the floor of the inside of the palace. The long hallways stretched for a while before they came across any sort of room or stairs. They arrived at a hall with many people in white sitting around, chatting, and that place made the hallway look as though they had barely tried. A massive, beautiful chandelier hung from the ceiling, surrounded by smaller but equally impressive chandeliers. The room was brightened by the stained windows that seemed to be pouring light into the room. Ning and the rest were given a few seconds to take in the scenery of the hall before being taken away to where the Pope would be. They walked up the staircase with golden railings and arrived outside a room with a small seating area created for people like Ning and the others who came to meet the Pope. "Sit here for a few minutes. I'll come get you once I'm certain His Holiness is ready to see you," the cardinal said and walked into the room. Ning and the rest stayed outside, and both Jasmine and Tim started exclaiming just how incredible the place was. Ning nodded. This place was indeed incredible. It wasn't as good looking at the palace he had spent a month ago in Candor, but this was still very impressive. Ning joined in their excitement for a few minutes before the door opened and a young man with a thin smile on his face walked out. "Sir Ning, Sir Tim, and Miss Jasmine?" the young man asked. "Yes," Ning answered. "His Holiness will see you now," the young man said. "Please follow me." Ning stood up and followed the young man with the other two following behind him. They walked into the room and found out that they still had to walk through a hallway to get to where they had to. Ning looked at the young man before him and wondered what age the young man was. He looked older than Tim, but somehow still so very young. He couldn't help but wonder just how it was that was possible. They passed the hallway into a giant hall with many seats around the room, scattered in a symmetrical order. Cardinal Farses, Cardinal Elias, and Cardinal Marcus waited for them in the room, alongside the thin man who Ning had seen on the balcony a few times now. Lucius Garnerwold stood up from his seat and placed his hands in front of his chest to give a warm welcome to all three of them. Tim and Jasmine immediately got on one of their knees and gave the best bow they could. Ning, meanwhile, simply gave a small bow of respect and no more. Cardinal Marcus grimaced at the sight but said nothing. He looked toward the other two, of which Cardinal Farses shook his head and Cardinal Elias showed no reaction. "You stand before His Holiness, Pope of the Faith of Xerneas, leader of the free people," Cardinal Farses said. "Introduce yourselves and your purpose in coming here today." "I am Timothy, Your Holiness. I came here today to have a chance to see you," Tim said. There wasn't anything that he wanted that he could get from this situation. Truth was, he didn't want anything at all. "I am called Jasmine. I am honored to see you so close, Your Holiness," Jasmine said. Then it was Ning's turn to speak. "I am Ning Ruigong, and I am here to shake your hands," he said. The cardinals showed varying reactions from disappointment to anger to helplessness. "You have come to touch me and tell me something about myself that I don't completely understand," the Pope said. "Do I have that right?" "Pretty much," Ning said. "Do you agree to this handshake?" The Pope did not reply, but instead asked another question. "I am told that you have a power that you were born with. Is that true?" he asked. I don't know," Ning said. "I've had it for a long time, but I don't remember where it started. I was either born with it, or I gained it sometime between when I was born and when I was 8. And you can do something to people that you touch. Do you know what you can do?" the Pope asked. "It doesn't work at all on regular people, but when someone comes along that isn't a person, it does kill the person I'm targeting," he said. "And you're certain this is a power? And not something that you could have gotten from a divine treasure that you don't know about?" the Pope asked. "No, I'm certain about that. My powers do not come from any sort of treasure of this world," Ning said. "I see. Then you may approach me," the Pope said. The cardinals looked toward the side for a second, wanting to tell the Pope something, but decided not to. Ning slowly walked forward and saw an intense look on him from all four, as though they were trying to see what he would do to fault him on a single mistake. He wasn't sure what they were looking for, but certainly they wouldn't find it. He walked straight to them and stopped right in front of the Pope's arm's reach away. The three cardinals looked toward the Pope and waited for confirmation. The Pope shook his head. "It seems you truly do not own any treasures at all," he said. "Now, let us check about the powers you have gained as well." Ning looked into the blue eyes of the somewhat young-looking man who stood before him. "How do you know that I do not have any treasures?" Ning asked. "How will you check the powers that I have?" The Pope pointed to the hat that he wore, with a golden band around it with gems studded into it. "This is a treasure sensing and disarming every treasure in a large area. I could tell since the moment you arrived in this place that the young lady and the young man behind their own treasures. Even though the young man hasn't brought it here today, I can sense its aura on him through this hat, and I know that the young lady currently owns a treasure on herself as well. But if you attempt to use it right now, you will find yourself unable to do so. That is the power of my hat. All treasures in my vicinity become inert and nothing more than decoration." Jasmine touched her ring softly and felt surprised at the Pope's words. "The crown of emptiness," Tim said softly, remembering the name of the item that he had read just a few days ago in the Cardinal's library. Ning heard his words and perhaps him alone. He looked at the Pope's hat for a moment and then looked down toward the Pope himself. "I understand," he said. "Then how will you be checking the powers that I do have?" "That is simple as well," the Pope said and reached out for Ning. Ning remained still, unsure what was going to happen, and let the man touch his forehead. The Pope closed his eyes for a second, seemingly thinking about something. Halfway through, his face turned into a frown, making the three cardinals ready into action. The Cardinal of Coins wasn't much of a fighter, but the Cardinal of Justice and the Cardinal of Life were true fighters themselves. They had known death and hardships before coming into the life of a cardinal. They were more than ready to beat Ning if the necessity called for it. The Pope removed his arm from Ning and looked at him. "Strange, I do not sense any power from you at all," he said. Ning gave a soft smile. "Strange," he thought, "and you aren't Zarinus either." The first of his three suspects had turned out short. The Pope in the end was just a man that was more fanatic than anything perhaps. At the same time, the Pope continued, "I do sense some strangeness in you." Ning looked up. "What strangeness?" he asked. "You lack a level of," the Pope paused, trying to find words. "You lack vitality." That is perhaps the wrong choice of words on my part, but that is the only way I can explain what I am feeling. Ning frowned slightly, and the rest of the cardinals got curious as well. "You see," the Pope continued, "I have two powers with me. One is what I was born with over 100 years ago, and the other one is what I was given when I became the Pope. It is a power passed down from Pope to Pope." Ning gave a surprised look. "Are you allowed to tell me this?" he asked. "I make the rules, young man," the Pope said with some amusement to his words. "I choose what I can and cannot do. I choose to tell you because your body has amused me today." "I see," Ning said. "Pardon my words, please continue." The Pope nodded. "I won't tell you what one of my powers is, but the one that I was given when I became the Pope is the power to recognize a person with power. You see, a human has a certain rhythm to their soul, a certain flicker of life that tells me that they are human. However, just that means that these people are regular humans. However, once in a while, I will sense a man or woman with a regular rhythm to their soul, a different flicker to their life. That is when I can tell you that they are in fact beings with power. That is how we find people with power," the Pope said and then frowned a little. "However, in your case, I could not find that. I couldn't even find the regular rhythm. There is certainly something very faint in there, but it is not the regular rhythm of a regular person's soul or the irregular rhythm of someone with power. You are a different human that I have never seen before," the Pope said. "Do you really have a power?" The Pope's eyes took on an innocent look of curiosity that made Ning not want to lie to him. He had understood by this point just what was happening here. Because Ning didn't have a true soul and only an imitation of it, the Pope's power was becoming incapable of sensing through it. So, now there was nothing he could do except maybe fake the rhythm to make the Pope believe he had power. But Ning decided not to do that. "I do have a power," Ning said. "But I will be honest, I have never used it before." I have tried too many times before but have come up short. He looked at the 3 cardinals behind him. My powers, as I know it, require a certain condition. That condition is something I have been failing to meet ever since I started on this journey a few months ago. Ning looked back at the Pope. You touched me just now, and in that touch, I was able to tell. You are not the one I'm looking for either, he said. He gave a slight bow toward the Pope. My apologies for all the problems and tensions I must have brought to you and your people by insisting that I meet you. That is all right, the Pope said. I was able to meet someone so fascinating like you, and my men tell me that your presence has been rather helpful in different places. The Pope looked toward the cardinals who nodded back. Ning gave a slight grin. You jest, Your Holiness, he said. I fear there is nothing else I can do for you now that everything is done. If that is how it is, then that is how Zerinus meant it to be, the Pope said. Don't be saddened that you did not reach your destination today, child. Be happy that your journey continues. Keep on this path and you will find that which you are searching for. Zerinus wills it so, the Pope said. Ning barely hid the snicker from the Pope. The irony in those words was something only he knew and he nearly let it show. Ning looked back toward Tim and Jasmine. Your Holiness, would you please give your blessings to these 2 friends of mine as well? He asked. If you request it so, the Pope said and turned toward the other 2. Children, come here. Tim and Jasmine arrived. Jasmine bowed before the Pope first and let him place a hand on her head, as he spoke something deep under his breath. Ning could hear the chant, a chant that called for Zerinus to bless his mortals with luck and miracles. Ning kept watch for a miracle. Who knew, Zerinus might just show up to do something in this place. Jasmine walked away and Tim moved forward. The Pope put his hand on top of him too and started chanting the prayer once again. The Pope was only halfway through the chant when he stopped and looked at the young man before him. Child, look at me, he said. Tim paused and looked up toward the Pope. Did I do something wrong, Your Holiness? He asked. Speak not right now, the Pope said and touched Tim's forehead as he closed his eyes. Immediately, Tim moved back, away from the Pope. At the same time, the cardinals moved into action, a knife from the Cardinal Marcus's sleeve sticking next to Tim's throat, ready to dig in. Stop it! The Pope ordered immediately when he saw what his cardinals were doing. Cardinal Farces let go of the sword handle he was holding to and was ready to pull. Cardinal Marcus pulled away the knife and placed it into his sleeve once again. The Pope stepped down from where he had been and walked straight toward Tim. Child, what is your name? He asked. Tim, Tim said timidly. Tim, do you know that you have powers as well? The Emperor asked. Jasmine showed looks of shock and so did the cardinals. Ning gave a look of understanding as if made sense why Tim had reacted the way he had. Tim looked around, asking for help. His eyes fell on Ning, and Ning gave a simple nod. The action reassured Tim more than whatever its meaning could have been. Yes, Tim said with a solemn voice. And what is this power? The Pope asked. I can use any divine treasure, regardless of whether it has an owner or not, Tim said. The Pope's eyes widened at the usefulness of the power. Fascinating, he said. Have you experimented with your powers yet? A little, Tim said. There aren't many treasures that I get to train with. I see, the Pope said. Then, what if I could provide you with a large amount of treasure to practice with? Would you agree to join the church and become the next in line to become the Pope? Novelfire.net. The sudden question of that magnitude sent Tim's mind spiraling into confusion and despair. Tim felt very distressed by the sudden question from the Pope. It was less so the fact that he was afraid he would be forced into becoming a Pope, but the fact that he didn't know if he wanted to refuse. However, that meant that he was likely going to no longer be free at all, contained in one place like the Pope. He wasn't sure if he wanted that. He was a person who stole the seer stone from the university to go look for a treasure in the southern oceans. There was a spirit of freedom in him and he didn't want to have it be rid from him. There was also the fact that he knew Ning was going around to try and kill Zerinus. He knew what Zerinus was. At least he knew that he was no god at all, and it was this world that created the treasures instead. Zerinus was just someone who took the credit for something he didn't do. How could he become a pope for such a being in good faith? Once Ning had done what he had said he would do, would there even be a need for a pope? What's wrong? The Pope asked. Do you not want to become a pope? Tim wasn't sure how to answer such a question. How many times would someone ask him a question like this? Tim, Ning called out to him. Tim slowly turned to look at Ning, any diversion making him feel good at the moment. Yes? He asked. Refuse for now, he said. The Pope looked at Ning with a curious expression before turning toward Tim. He waited to see how the young man would respond to that. But Sir Ning, Tim said, I don't know if I will have such a chance again. Ning shook his head. By the time we are done with our journey, barely any time will have passed at all. And the church will still stand here, and it will need another pope. You can decide now if you want to, but don't you want to think about it for a long time? You can take your time coming up with a decision, and by the end of the year, if you still want to join, you know you joined because you wanted to and not because you were forced by the circumstances. Tim gave a deep thought to those words and turned toward the Pope. Your Holiness, would this opportunity still be here if I choose to come here a year later? He asked. The Pope looked at Tim and sighed. My apologies. I shouldn't have asked you such an important question so early, he said. Yes, the church will still need a pope and this place will be open to you if you desire to come back. Thank you, Tim said. In that case, I would like to delay my answer. A year from now, I will find a way to provide my answer for certain whether I want to join or not. Very well, the Pope said. You have my blessings either way. With no more words for the Pope to say to them, Ning and the rest left the magnificent palace and walked outside with the Cardinal of Justice. They got into a car and made their way back to the Cardinal's home where they would stay until the day the Pope would go on a parade. Novelfire.net. That day happened to be only 3 days later, and in those 3 days, the country was more excited and more rowdy than any time else that Ning and the others had come here. Even at level 1 where there weren't many people allowed to come here, the streets were filled to the brim with people of all sorts. Then finally on the day of the Pope's parade, the roads were simply packed except for a small procession that was allowed to make its way through. There were multiple cars rolling down the street with paladins and bishops filling them to the brim. In one of the cars at the center, modified for a person to stand on and be seen, was the Pope who stood tall and smiled at everyone as he was paraded down the mountain. That day, the entire city had basically stopped for a couple of hours. The Pope's parade went without a hitch. Ning and the rest only saw him leave from level 1 around early day and saw him return late afternoon before he was taken back to the palace. After that, the Pope wouldn't be seen for a long time again. As soon as the parade was completed, there was nothing for the people to do there at all, so they started leaving one after another. The streets that were fully packed just the previous day were suddenly no more. A sort of calmness flooded the street after the parade. The Cardinal of Justice came to meet Ning that night while he was in the library with Tim, reading up on a few things in the history. You have confirmed that you do not wish to stay? The Cardinal asked. Yes, Ning said. There is so much more I have to do and believe I have spent enough time here. I see, the Cardinal said. In that case, I have saved you 3 spots in one of the ships that leave here tomorrow at noon. It will take you north toward Horus as you have said you wish to. Yes, Ning said. We wish to see the amusement park there that is said to be the best in the world. I see, the Cardinal said. I hope you have a great time there. Ning slept through the night and the next morning, he was taken through the empty streets of Erin, making his way down to the shipyard with the other 2. Jasmine said her goodbye to Gallimore, with whom no relationship panned out for her. Tim appeased the Cardinal's worry about never returning and got onto the boat as well. Ning got on finally and waved goodbye as the 3 left for their next journey. We never got to say goodbye to Tanaya, did we? Jasmine asked. That poor woman came and went without doing much. She caught a great criminal. I'm sure she went back to her country with commendation, Ning said. She was never going to be doing anything from the start anyway, Tim said. She suspected Sir Ning was a criminal. Of course, she wouldn't do much. She just tried to protect the Pope is all, Ning said. Anyway, let's forget about her for now. Let's think of what we are going to do next. What are we going to do next? Tim asked. I don't know, Ning said. Let's just go and see this amusement park and this camera that our great inventor made. Why do you call it that? Tim asked. Camera, is that a word from north of the Great Reef? You still believe he's from the north? Jasmine asked. If you ask me, I would say he is a Zuran treasure himself. Ning smiled. Do you want to learn who or what I am? He asked. Both of the two people suddenly got upright and looked at Ning. Are you going to tell us? Tim asked. Tell us, Jasmine said. Ning smiled. I will tell you the day we say our goodbyes, he said, and changed the topic once more. There wasn't much to do on their journey to Horus, so the three of them talked and talked. Jasmine tried reminding Ning about the 3 treasures she was promised but only got told to wait patiently in return. The ship took an entire day to reach Horus, arriving at the docks late in the morning. This place was as Ning had expected from other places and was a sticking pile of mess with fish being sold at every turn. Horus was a small island nation with a lot of activity as it was considered an essential location in trade routes all around the world. It was one of the only countries closest to the openings in the Great Reef and was thus a place where shipments from all across the world came through. The country was also just as developed with cars and larger vans rolling up and down the street. Ning and the rest had to make their way to the other side of the country by train to arrive at Gova City where the amusement park was located in. Since they had arrived in the morning, they decided to go there directly. After a lengthy 8-hour train ride, they finally arrived at Gova City around evening. After quickly finding themselves a place to stay, there was nothing more for the 3 to do here. I wonder if Dr. Tony is still around, Tim said as he looked through a newspaper to see the events of the day. I should send a letter to my father to tell them that I am all right too. Jasmine fell somewhat silent suddenly. I wonder how your people are taking care of the kids. I hope they are doing fine, she said. I'm sure they are doing fine, Ning said. One thing you can count on is the fact that those 2 will follow my command to their dying breath. They would rather lay down their lives than have me find out that they disobeyed me. Novel Fire, novelfire.net. Such fanatic loyalty? Tim asked. That's a flaw in them, Ning said. It just happens when you are. Never mind. You keep teasing us and then say nothing. It's honestly not very fun, Tim said. Ning smiled. We will visit the amusement park tomorrow. But what about after that? Where do we go? Jasmine asked. Ning looked at Tim. Any news on where those other 2 are? He asked. Tim shook his head. I haven't found anything of note, he said. Dr. Zarius has probably gone back to where he lives, which nobody knows. And Naman Rayworld could honestly be anywhere in the world. He has so many houses, most likely that he would be hard to find. Jasmine gave a small frown. Wait. Who is this Naman person? Why'd I know his name? He asked. He's the owner of the Eastwind Trading Company, the largest trading company in the world. There should be an establishment belonging to them in this very city given how important this country is in the world's trading route, Tim said. Ooh, what if he is here then? Could we find that out? Jasmine asked. If someone that big was in the city, the newspaper would be alight with information on them, Tim said. I doubt they are here at all. I was just saying what if, Jasmine said. You are the brains here, so you figure it out. Tim shook his head and continued reading the newspaper. We have no information on either of these 2. So what do we do now? Ning thought for a moment and shrugged. We got to the amusement park. That's what we came here to visit, did we not? He asked. We did, but I thought we came hoping to find either of these 2 people, Tim said. Just because we came to meet someone doesn't mean we can't do something else, Ning said. Tim frowned. All right, tomorrow we go to the amusement park. What then? He asked. What do we do after that? After that? Ning thought for a long time. We have a lot of gold lying around, so how about this? Instead of constantly having to go around looking for a boat, why don't we buy our own boat? Both Tim and Jasmine were taken aback by the sudden suggestion. I'm sorry, a boat? Jasmine asked. A ship, Ning said. A decently sized one. And do what? Jasmine asked. Go pirating? That's not a bad idea, Ning said. Be serious, Tim said. Why would we buy a ship? So that we can go find some treasure, he said and looked at the 2 of them. Don't you 2 want to go treasure hunting? Tim and Jasmine screamed at the top of their lungs as the Ferris wheel spun round and round, making them feel exalted with every swing. Their day at the amusement park until now had been fun, but this was the most fun they had had in their entire journey. Jasmine screamed at the top of her lungs as the wheel swung down, and Tim nearly fainted a couple of times but managed to hold on. Ning simply enjoyed watching the other 2 people enjoy. By the time the wheel had come to a stop and they were to walk out, the two of them were all smiles. Novelfire. Novelfire.net. Ning let the two talk about how fun it was while taking them toward a place they had decided to visit beforehand. It was a large tent set up at the edge of the amusement park where people came every day to try and talk about various things they wanted to sell or reveal to the world. That was the place where Ning had read Zarius had revealed his camera for the first time. They arrived by the tent, at which point both Tim and Jasmine had calmed down a lot, and entered. A group of people were already inside, watching someone on the stage, giving a demonstration of something. A mannequin was made to wear some sort of shirt that was in tatters, while the man stood to the side with a rifle that he prepared. You saw how easily my shirt protected the mannequin from stab wounds. Now watch how it will protect someone from gunshots too, he said and shot the mannequin. A large hole opened in the shirt with the single shirt, and a few people walked onto the stage to take off the mannequin's shirt. After the shirt was out, the man revealed a wounded, but otherwise unhurt mannequin. Had there not been the shirt, the mannequin's entire chest would have been blown wide open. Some people tried to speak out about how the shirt didn't save the mannequin from getting hurt in the end, but those who knew how much safer the shirt had made the mannequin clapped and shouted cheers at the man. Ning ignored the demonstration on the stage and looked around for someone who would be part of the administration of this place. He found a person by the door and went to talk to the man. He turned out to be one of the guards in the place, who quickly told Ning just who the place belonged to. Ning then took the other two and went to find the man in charge of the whole thing. "Are you Sir Havoc?" Ning asked a somewhat fat man with a top hat and a monocle. The man looked up, his long and pointy nose drooping downward. "Who is asking?" the man asked. "Hello, I'm Ning. I was hoping to ask you a few questions if you are free. I promise I won't take too much of your time," Ning said. "I have time. Ask away," the man said. "I hear Zarius Braxford revealed one of his inventions in this place. Do you?" "Yes, he did," the man said excitedly, cutting off Ning. "My park was lucky enough to host the great inventor's announcement of something so great. You cannot believe just how great it was. Are you someone who has something you want to reveal too? We have a bit of a backlog now, but I suggest you join. We get quite the number of investors every day, and as long as what you are trying to sell is good, you will find people to buy it for sure." "That's not really what I'm here for," Ning said. "I'm hoping to ask if you know where the great inventor returned to. Or if you know who would know such an answer." The man gave Ning a weird look. "I don't know," he said. "I wouldn't tell you if I even knew. Who are you?" Ning smiled. "You see, I'm someone looking to invest in the great inventor's new products and I was hoping I could find any sort of information on him." The man paused for a second and looked Ning up and down. He judged Ning by the clothes he wore and gave an expression of suspicion. "How do I know you or what you say you are?" the man asked. "I've never seen an investor as young as you. Do you even have the money?" Ning reached into the coat he wore and made it appear as though he was pulling out a large pouch from somewhere inside his coat. As he pulled it out, the pouch jingled with coins and the man looked surprised. Ning opened the pouch and showed the contents to the old man who was more than surprised to see a large pouch filled to the brim with gold coins. "Dear Zarinus," the man shouted. "You must be quite rich to walk around with so much money on you. How rich are you, man?" "I don't believe that is the topic of our conversation," Ning said. "I simply wish to ask about the inventor Zarius and how I would go about investing in him." The man shrugged. "The truth is, I couldn't tell you where to find him. The inventor likes to hide from the public he has come up with his next invention. However, I can get you to talk with someone who works somewhat directly for the inventor." "Oh, please, tell me more," Ning asked. "Leave me your details and I will tell the person to try and contact you. He isn't in the city, so you will have to wait for a while before you get anything back from this man." "I'm fine with that," Ning said. He quickly took out a piece of paper and wrote down the details of how to find him. "Just tell the person to leave a message here and I will get it within a day or two," Ning said. The man looked at a piece of paper and nodded. "All right, I will do as you say." Ning felt satisfied with just getting to meet with the person who was close to the inventor Zarius and turned to leave. "One moment," Tim said before Ning could leave and looked at the old man Havoc. "Sir Havoc, about 12 days ago, a scholar by the name of Tony Scarden should have come to this place to give some sort of—" "Did you say Tony Scarden?" the old man suddenly said and a look of rage filled his face. Don't speak of that goddamn man in my tent. Ning and Jasmine both looked at each other with a hint of surprise in their eyes. Tim was simply shocked by the man's sudden outburst. I'm sorry, Tim said. Did he do something? Tim had read the newspapers about the man, but there had been nothing in them. He simply had no idea about anything that could have possibly happened. What didn't that man do? The man shouted, coming here and claiming that God doesn't exist and whatnot. He tried to claim that the entire faith of Zerinus was a sham and that Zerinus didn't create the Zuran treasure but that they formed naturally. What a great nonsense, a man who stood close to Havoc said. We should have left him to die, another man said. Havoc suddenly straightened and looked back at the two, who quickly shut up and said nothing. Ning grew quite curious now. It seems something big happened during his presentation, he said. He claimed God wasn't real, so every single person who is firmly religious tried to kill him for his blasphemous words. We had to quickly sneak him away from the tent before the rowdy crowd could lynch him. That sounds terrible, Ning said. It was an unfortunate day, the man said. But it was that man's fault for claiming something so outrageous. Do you know where he went afterward? Did he safely get away from the city? Tim asked. City? Havoc asked with a huff. That man couldn't even leave the amusement park that day. We had to hide him in one of the tents the whole night so he wouldn't get killed by the crowd that was in the city looking for him. They had already found his hotel room somehow and apparently destroyed everything. We had to sneak him out the next day, and since that day he's been living somewhere in safety, the man said. He seemed truly troubled by everything that had happened. Novelfire.net. Ning looked at the man's expression and realized that the man didn't like Tony either, and it was also because he was a religious man as well. However, he had still done the right thing to save another man's life. Would you mind telling us where he might be? Ning asked. Why? Do you three plan on killing him too? Havoc asked. I don't believe in Zerinus, Ning said. I believe he is a fake god too. He then smiled at the man, watching his expression closely. Havoc's eyes widened and then they narrowed as though trying to discern what Ning was playing at. You truly believe it, don't you? He asked. Of course, Ning said. Goddamn idiot, Havoc said. Now, would you mind telling us where he is? Ning asked. What is it to you lot? Why do you want to find him? The man asked. We're somewhat acquainted with the man. You see, he has a tendency of nearly getting beaten to death. Back when we were going from Warford to Kogonia on a Zeppelin, that man rushed into the pilot's room and tried to take control of the Zeppelin because he thought we were all going to die. People kicked him to near death that day because they thought he was going to kill them. We had to save him that day. If not, he would have fully died. Havoc gave a wondering look. Is that true? He asked. Absolutely the truth, Ning said. If you need more to tell me about him, I can tell you that he wears a watch that can somewhat tell the future. If you know anything about him, you would know I'm telling the truth. Fine, the man said. I'll tell him you are looking for him. I will give him the same address as the one you just gave me, and tell him to go visit you if he wishes to. If he doesn't, I can't help you there. Ning nodded. But do tell him that I can take him away from this country, and he should do it soon since we will be leaving in a few days, he said. What about the inventor? How will you meet his man when he comes back? The man asked. We will come back from time to time. Trust me, it won't take me more than a day so long as you have the person contact me at that address, Ning said. The man looked at the contact details again and shrugged. If this person wanted to be contacted at a hotel, then he would let it be. I will do what you ask, the man said. If you end up meeting the inventor by any chance, do tell him to come here to reveal his new invention again. I will do as you say, Ning said. I never forget a favor. They left the giant tent and then made their way out of the amusement park entirely. Walking out of the park and into the city reminded them of just how colorful and fun the park was. It was as though it was a separate space entirely and the city was a grim reminder of what life really was like. Ning walked along the street with the other two following him, questioning just what he was going to do next. Don't you guys remember what we have to do next? He asked. Treasure hunting. Jasmine asked. Yes, Ning said. And what is the most important thing for treasure hunting? Jasmine and Tim's eyes widened slightly. Are we on our way to buy a ship? Ning and the rest arrived at the shipyard where multiple shipping vessels were tied on either side of a dock. A young woman with silver eyes and tanned skin walked Ning around the place, showing the various ships they had for sale. You need many people to run these ships. That one with the golden bow needs around 40 people in total to run. And that one with a bird's figurehead needs over 50. Novel Fire, novelfire.net. If you truly want a ship that does not require that many people to run it, I'm afraid it is not in this place. Even a simple dinghy needs 2 people to run in most cases after all. Ning nodded as he looked through the shipyard. He began seeing a small flaw in his plan. Are there truly no ships that can work with just 4 people? He asked. Nope, the girl said. Just handling the sails alone would take you a lot of people. Then you need someone to deal with food, someone to stay in the crow's nest, and not to mention that you would have to constantly cycle through crewmates day and night so as to not overwork them. I understand, Ning said. He didn't want to do what he was planning now, but it seemed he would have to. Thank you for your time, Ning said and tossed a single gold coin toward the young girl. For your troubles. The young girl looked at the gold coin in surprise and looked up at Ning, unable to believe what she had just received. Sir, you don't, this is too much, she started saying, but Ning simply waved at her and walked away with the other 2. So what now? Tim asked. Are we not buying a ship? Are we to ask someone else to take us on their ship for treasure hunting? No, that is not what we will be doing, Ning said. I have another plan. Let's just return back to the hotel for now. We will be going treasure hunting at least, right? Jasmine asked. That's all that matters for me, ship or no ship. Treasure hunting won't be stopped unless I learn the whereabouts of the other 2 people, Ning said. A big man walked out from the shipyard's office building and walked up to Ning and the other 2. That was quite fast. Did you come to a decision on what ship to buy? The big man asked. He was the owner of the entire place and worked as the manager in this instance. No, we decided that we aren't going to buy anything, Ning said. What? The man looked stunned. But why? I assure you that our ships are the finest in all of Gova. I dare say they're the best in all of Horus, the man said. Ning shook his head. It's not about the ships. Your assistant here helped us see that if we don't have someone to run the ship, we shouldn't be buying it so easily, he said. So, we decided to leave. We have no reason to stay here anymore. What? No, but you can always find sailors. There are people willing to go on boats all around. You just have to look for them. I'm not joking, the man said. His eyes flashed toward his assistant, who looked down as she realized what a mistake she had made. She was going to get scolded very soon for losing a big customer so easily. Tim came close to Ning's ear and whispered the same thing. Ning gave a rueful smile as he had come to realize what a mistake he had made as well. Well, let us restart then, Ning said and waved his hands. The man's expression suddenly changed and he looked around for a moment, confused about something. He then looked at Ning and the other 2 and gave a big smile. Welcome, customers. I'm the manager of the shipyard. How may I help you this fine day? The man asked. Tim and Jasmine suddenly looked at each other with weirded out looks, unsure what had just happened. Hi. Can you tell me the average costs of buying a ship here? I wish to purchase one, but I'm not sure if I have the money for it. The man gave a thoughtful look. Well, what sort of ship are you looking for? Is it for fishing? Or just traveling? The man asked. Traveling, I suppose, Ning said. Can you give me a price on such a vessel? The man gave a thoughtful look. Even the cheapest ship we have here comes to around 400 gold coins. So you would need that much at least. I see, Ning said. 400 gold coins. That's a big sum of money. I'll have to consult this with my family. Thank you for your help. Ning gave a small nod and walked away. Tim and Jasmine followed behind Ning quickly, walking by his side as they desperately vied for answers but to no avail. Ning would not tell them exactly what he had done to the man at all. I had to protect that young girl, he said and shrugged. Tim then tried asking about ships too, but there too he couldn't get any answers. Tim and Jasmine reluctantly stopped asking any sort of questions and returned back to their hotel rooms. They slept overnight and the next morning there was a letter for them brought to them by the concierge. Ning took the letter and read through it quickly. We will get to meet the professor today, it seems. He was given our message and will meet us in a restaurant downtown, Ning said. Tim got excited. Dr. Tony sent us a letter. This is good, he said. Let us go meet him then. Yes, Ning said. After a while, the three of them left the hotel room once again, making their way to a restaurant in a bustling part of the city where they would meet the professor.